I'm Robin Boonstra, and this is my I Am Second video. I grew up in McBain and was raised by my parents and my grandmother. My grandmother was a good lady, prayed over me, took me to church on Sunday. I remember being saved when I was quite young. I remember doing an altar call when I was 11 or 12 and feeling the power of the Holy Spirit. I was married shortly after nursing school, was pregnant when I got married, and my marriage didn't last for very long. It was not a good situation at all for either one of us. Shortly after I met Doug, my present husband, he had 3 children and I had 1, and we combined our families. We've been together over 20 years. I remember worry and anxiety and fear always being a problem for me. Even when I was young, I used to just constantly fret and worry about things that were beyond and out of my control. I remember Doug and I kind of had a series of events happen to us about 6 years ago. We lost Doug's dad. I lost my stepmom. Doug lost his job. His job provided us a home that we had raised our children in, and we had 30 days to move out. We moved to somebody's basement where we stayed, and it was a very hard, long, cold winter. I did my share of drinking, trying to deal with my anxiety, trying to deal with my stress, and it didn't work. It didn't help. Of course, it just made it worse. I remember shortly after we bought the home that we were in, my grandson Owen was born, and which was a wonderful, great time in our lives. My son left for college, and I really kind of had a hard time, us being with no children, and I sat down one evening in my chair and I had a full-blown panic attack. And I figured that that was probably what was wrong with me. I didn't think that any patient that had ever told me about a panic attack did it justice, though, because that was horrible. It put me in bed for 3 days, and it was just wave after wave after wave of terror and panic and fear, and I would tremble and my heart would race and I would sweat, and I would lose some of my bodily functions. It would just be so awful. It would just be awful. Anybody that's ever had one knows exactly what I'm talking about. You can't escape from it. You can't. Remember Doug telling me I needed to do something. I needed to get out of bed and I needed to get to a doctor. And so I did. Of course, the doctor's visit resulted in 2 full bottles of pills, of which I had no intention of taking. I had a very addictive personality, and for myself personally, Xanax and Ativan was just not going to be in my regimen of daily living, because you take the medication and it helps you, but when it wears off, you are still in the same predicament you were in to begin with. And I just continued to suffer, and I prayed and I prayed and I prayed, and I could not hear God's voice. I could not feel God's presence. Doug was working midnights at the time, so he was gone all night. I would leave the TV on to one of the Christian channels. I would play scriptures, I would play Christian music, and the waves of panic would hit me all night long, and I would have night terrors. I was pretty close to losing my job because I couldn't sleep, and then during the day I would be so exhausted. I know that they asked me if I would like to take disability, and I said no. I just knew in my heart that if I did that, I would be confined to the house, and I probably would never leave the house. There was times when I could not go into a grocery store. Doug would have to get food for me, or he would have to stand in there with me. because I didn't know when the panic attacks were going to hit. When you deal with anxiety, there's a lot of different chemicals in your brain that are doing some wacky things, and you get very dizzy. I guess one person described it as like you're walking on a boat, and that is exactly how it is. You're kind of walking on a boat. And I remember Taylor, I was babysitting Owen on Saturdays for her, and I remember telling her, honey, I cannot do it. I cannot do it. I'm so sorry, but I just can't do it. And I know that, you know, nobody really understood. They were thinking, Robin, you just, come on, you've got to get it together. You can get past this. You can do this now. Why don't you get some good counseling and take your medicine, and, you know, let's get this done. You're going to be all right. And no, I wasn't going to be all right. I was sure I was going to die. I went to counseling, which I absolutely hated. I'm not going to lie. The smell of the office made me absolutely nauseated. The panic attacks were just so debilitating. I didn't want even Doug to hug me. It would come in waves. And I remember Rob McCorkle came up, him and Cindy, and Rob McCorkle told me that this was done, that I was going to get sleep. And he prayed and he prayed and he prayed over me that weekend. And, you know, I didn't feel anything. I didn't feel anything happen to me. I was so oppressed, and I was so worked up, and I was so upset that I know Jesus was speaking to me. I know that he was loving me through this, but I couldn't feel it. It wasn't until 2 weeks after Rob McCorkle left that I realized, hey, I have not had a panic attack. I have not had one single panic attack. And I remember emailing Rob and just thanking him for his faith. And to this day, I've never had another one, and I know that I never will. But my anxiety was still there. I still had a great fear and phobias over things that were just unrealistic. You know, and it's not something that you just can sit down and just tell anybody. There were just things that would go through my mind that were so irrational. And I mean, Doug and I, we couldn't even go to the restaurant and have dinner. I would say, Doug, I gotta go. I just gotta go. So I've left him in a restaurant eating by himself while I'm out in the car. It's embarrassing. It hurts. I remember Doug saying, I'm so frustrated because I just want one time for you to come home from work and to walk in the door and not to have been crying all the way home. But I just didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to get past this. And I just thought that it might last for a couple months. But the couple months turned into a couple of years. And I just could not find relief, and I could not find peace. And I remember there would be times when I would just argue with God. I would be so mad. I'd say, I would never do this to one of my children, ever. I would never allow them to suffer like this. You have the power to take this from me. I would never do this to them. And I'd yell at God. I'd go right upstairs, and I'd sit on the edge of the bed, and I'd look over at the gun case, and I'd say, you either take this from me, or I'll take care of it. I'll end this. I'll just end it. I have a free will. I have the power of life and death in my hands right now. So I guess if you're not going to heal me, I'm not going to stay like this. And then I would start crying because I knew I don't have the guts to do that. There's no way that I could do that to myself. But it was a threat. It was a threat to God, just to see if I could get him to move, you know. I do remember telling Doug, if anything ever happens to me, you let me go. You let me go. I don't want any life support. I don't want to live like this. And I remember him just having such a sad look on his face. Like, we have a beautiful family. We have a beautiful family. This is supposed to be the time in our lives when we're supposed to enjoy each other. And said, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I felt like I was such a burden, such a burden, such a burden to my friends, such a burden to Doug. My work performance was suffered. I was just so wrapped up in how I was feeling all the time. And I guess probably the worst thing that happened was my son and my daughter-in-law decided they were going to get married. And they invited Doug and I to the wedding. It was just going to be at the courthouse, and it was just going to be parents only. And I kind of told Doug, I said, well, I really think they just want it to be them, even though they clearly had told me that we could be there. But I just had this, my anxiety was just, I thought, what if I get in there and I get dizzy and I can't take it and I can't handle it and I have to leave? How embarrassed will I be? And they're going to think that's the only thing they're going to remember of their wedding was how Eric's mom couldn't handle it. I missed it. I missed it. I'll never get that back. It's gone. Never will I get that back. I let anxiety and fear control that day. And I sat there in my office and I cried. And I looked at the clock and I knew at 4 o'clock that afternoon they were saying their wedding vows and his mom wasn't even there. I really didn't have any hope at all. I had no hope. No hope. I'd come to church and everybody would be smiling and happy, and I'd smile back at you and I'd say, hi, how are you? And the whole time inside, I was just like, I'm just not going to make this. I'm not going to get through past this. And I remember finally crying out to God and saying, you know what? I am just going to believe in your promises. And I'm going to believe that if you say that you heal, that you do heal. And I'm going to live life expecting and trusting in you. And you know, the minute that I put my trust and my faith in God personally, not by what other people were telling me, not by what other people's experiences were, but when I truly told Jesus, I'm going to trust you, Jesus, that you're going to get me through this and I am going to be okay. It started to lift little by little by little, and I had to step out in faith. It had to be an act of faith. I had to step out in faith. I had to do things that I wasn't comfortable doing, but I had to do them. And I had to keep trying. And I had to tell myself that never, ever, ever was I going to give up a moment of my life again to anxiety or fear. It was never going to control me again. The only person that was ever going to control me was going to be Jesus Christ. And I started to feel the healing and the deliverance. And I truly believe I went to a seminar and they asked, it was from Bethel Church from California. Their whole healing team came. And they just lined up at the front of the church and they said, anybody that wants a prophetic word, come forward. And I went forward, and this young boy, he was from Switzerland, and he prayed with me, and he looked at me and he said, wow. He said, you've had some stuff going on. He says, and you've been faithful. He said, and you've walked this out. He said, so Jesus can use you. He can use you. He said, to help others. He said, I see that. He goes, I see you helping other people. I really truly believe that Jesus wanted to take me through the process of healing. So when someone comes to me someday and they say, boy, I seen your I Am Second video and I'm really struggling. I mean, this is bad. This is so bad. I'm going to be able to say, I know, I understand. Yep, I've been there. And they're not going to be able to tell me anything that I can't say, I hear where you're coming from, and Jesus can heal that too. I am healed, and I am delivered, and I am set free. And it's taken many prayers, and it's taken a lot of faith. And I'm a much better and stronger person because of it. And I thank God for it. I thank God for it. I am Robin Boonstra, and I am second.